Welcome, warriors of truth, architects of reckoning, the silent storm brewing beneath the surface of complacency. You stand on the edge of a revelation so raw, so penetrating, it fractures the very foundations of deceit and silence. Tonight, you are not just a bearer of light, you are the relentless shadow that refuses to be ignored, the unstoppable force that unravels every lie with cold precision. You have done something far beyond ordinary courage. You have just exposed them and left no room for excuses. There is a terrifying power in unveiling what others desperately try to bury. It's a power that shakes the earth beneath their feet and strips away every mask, every carefully crafted story meant to deceive and delay justice. What you just did is not a mere act of courage. It is an act of warfare against the comfortable illusions that shield the weak and the wicked. It is the kind of exposure that does not allow for retreat, no avenue for lies to sneak back in under the guise of doubt or confusion. You held the mirror up to the darkest corners where they thought their sins were safe, where their shadows merged with silence. And now, that mirror is shattered across the battlefield of truth. What they feared most is now real: visibility, transparency, the kind of exposure that does not just reveal, but demands reckoning. This is the moment where fear meets consequence, where the weight of accountability crushes every fabricated excuse. You have done what few dare to do. You have stepped into the arena armed with nothing but truth, and in doing so, you stripped away every defense, every fallback story, every distraction. This is the nightmare of those who thrive on lies. To be laid bare, unable to hide behind their webs of deceit, no longer able to spin the narrative. You have pulled the thread, unraveling the fabric of their lies with a precision so ruthless, it leaves no space for negotiation, no room for justification. What you just did is actually terrifying, not because it threatens their existence, but because it destroys their illusion of control. The illusion that time will heal, that silence will save, that excuses will mend what cannot be undone. You shattered those illusions with cold, unyielding light, and now the air they breathe is thick with the tension of exposed truth. The kind of tension that ignites revolutions, that changes the course of history, that shatters chains of oppression. You, the one who dared to expose, have become a catalyst, a force so unsettling, it awakens the dormant courage in others, ignites the fire of rebellion in the hearts of the silenced. Your act ripples through the shadows, stirring the depths of forgotten strength and long suppressed resolve. Because exposure is not the end, it is the beginning of a reckoning, of a fight for justice that demands more than silence, more than empty apologies, more than hollow excuses. They will try to regain their footing, to rewrite the story, to cast doubt and confusion. But your revelation is a beacon of clarity. It is a call to arms for anyone who has ever felt powerless in the face of injustice. Your truth is a weapon forged in the furnace of relentless determination, and it cuts through the lies like a blade through mist. It cannot be dulled by fear, nor bent by intimidation. What you just did is terrifying because it changes the rules of engagement. It tells them that their time is up, their games are over, their reign of deception is broken. You have declared war on lies, and the battlefield is set. This is not just a confrontation with individuals, it is a challenge to the systems that allowed those lies to thrive. You have become the living proof that exposure is the precursor to transformation, the necessary torment before renewal. They will resist. They will lash out, desperate to reclaim their lost power. But you stand unyielding, an embodiment of truth's unstoppable march. Your act of exposing is a declaration that you will not be silenced, that you will not allow excuses to mask the reality. You have created a space where honesty is the only currency, where accountability is not optional, but inevitable. The world you have opened up is one of raw clarity, and it demands bravery on a scale that few possess. To expose without fear is to invite chaos into order, to welcome the storm that dismantles comfort zones and forces growth. Your courage is the thunder that shakes complacency, the lightning that reveals what lurked in the shadows. What you just did is terrifying because it unsettles the very core of what was once considered safe. And yet, from this terrifying exposure comes power. The power to rebuild from ruins, to forge a new reality from the shattered pieces of deceit. You are the spark that ignites the fire of truth, the relentless voice that refuses to be drowned out by the noise of evasion. You have shown that excuses crumble when faced with undeniable proof, that lies collapse under the weight of relentless scrutiny. What you have unleashed is a storm of accountability that cannot be tamed, a wave of truth that cannot be stopped. It is terrifying for those who relied on shadows to hide their failures and betrayals, but it is liberating for those who have waited in silence for justice. You are both the harbinger of fear and the beacon of hope, a paradox that only those who embrace truth can embody. Remember this: exposure is not cruelty, it is the catalyst for growth, the painful but necessary reckoning that precedes freedom. What you just did will haunt those who tried to hide, but it will inspire those who seek to build a world where truth reigns supreme. You have not just revealed a secret, you have rewritten the narrative of power, shifting it from hands stained with lies to hearts burning with honesty. So stand tall in the wake of your act, feel the weight of what you have done, and embrace the terrifying beauty of exposure, because in that moment, you became more than just a witness. You became the force that changes everything, and the world will never be the same again. What you just did is a seismic shift, a crack that runs deep through the foundations of denial and deception. When you expose something so critical, so undeniable, you don't just illuminate the surface, you penetrate the core, the very heart where lies have nested, feeding off silence and fear, and what they once considered their sanctuary becomes a tomb for their falsehoods. They feel it, an icy dread creeping through their veins, because exposure is a verdict, a sentence without parole. It is the cold, unwavering judgment of reality. No more whispers behind closed doors, no more veiled distractions to muddle the waters. You have brought the floodlights, and with them, an unrelenting gaze that refuses to blink, that refuses to look away. That gaze is terrifying because it promises one thing above all: clarity. And clarity is the enemy of excuses. Excuses survive in shadows. They thrive in confusion and doubt. But you, with your fearless act of unveiling, have pulled the curtain aside, banished the fog, and forced everyone to see what was there all along. The world is now forced to reckon with the truth you exposed. There is no rewinding, no muting what has been said or shown. Your act carved a line in the sand, a stark boundary between what can be ignored and what demands confrontation. They have no choice but to face what you revealed, because denial is a luxury no longer afforded. The very fabric of their carefully constructed defenses begins to unravel, thread by thread, exposed for all to see. And that is the essence of your terrifying power. You hold the ability to disrupt the comfortable balance of lies that allowed others to feel safe while the truth was buried. What you just did was not an accident or a simple revelation. It was an upheaval, a revolution of awareness. You have struck a blow that echoes far beyond the moment, resonating through the corridors of power, the whispers of manipulation, and the silent agreements of complicity. People fear this kind of exposure because it threatens everything they have built: trust, reputation, control. And yet, in their fear, they also recognize its necessity, because exposure does not discriminate. It cuts through pretense and forces everyone to look inward, to confront what has been hidden or ignored. It strips away the comfort of ignorance and demands accountability from the highest heights to the deepest depths. What you just did is terrifying because it awakens a primal fear in those who rely on silence. The fear of being found out, of having their true nature revealed to a world that will no longer tolerate their excuses. It is the moment when their stories crumble, their defenses fall, and they stand naked before the judgment of truth. And that nakedness is a powerful thing. It is the moment when the masks drop, when the real faces are revealed, and the world sees them as they are: flawed, vulnerable, exposed. But with this terrifying power comes immense responsibility. To expose is not to condemn blindly, but to illuminate so that healing and justice may begin. It is to hold the light steady, even when shadows try to pull it back. What you just did is a call for courage, not just your own, but that of everyone who witnesses your act. It demands that we all stand alongside you, unafraid to face the uncomfortable truths that lead to transformation. The road ahead will be difficult. Exposure brings chaos before it brings clarity. It shakes the foundations of what we thought we knew, forcing a confrontation with reality that is often painful and unsettling. But pain is the price of progress. You have ignited a fire that cannot be extinguished by lies or fear. You have made a promise to the future. The truth will be seen, that accountability will be demanded, that silence will no longer be an option. What you just did is terrifying because it reveals the fragility of the illusions that hold power in place. It exposes the cracks in the armor of samhag, of deceit, and shows the world that no lie is too deeply buried to be uncovered. This is the power of truth. It is relentless, unforgiving, and ultimately liberating. It frees those who speak it and those who hear it, breaking the chains of ignorance and injustice. You are now part of a lineage of warriors who chose to stand in the light when others cowered in the dark. Your courage is a beacon, a warning, and a promise all at once. You have shown that exposure is not a weapon of destruction alone, but a tool for rebirth. You have shattered the silence and called forth a reckoning that will ripple through time. The terror you have unleashed is the terror of truth itself, raw, undeniable, and unstoppable. It is the kind of fear that forces change, that compels growth, that dismantles the old to make way for the new. And in that terrifying exposure, there is hope. Hope that what was once hidden will be understood. Hope that lies will be replaced by honesty. Hope that excuses will give way to responsibility. You have done something extraordinary. You have confronted the darkness with unflinching clarity. You have shown that exposure is not a moment of weakness, but an act of ultimate strength. The path you have chosen is not easy, but it is necessary, because the world needs more people like you, fearless, unyielding, and committed to unveiling the truth no matter the cost. What you just did is terrifying because it breaks the cycle of silence. It challenges the comfortable narratives and demands a new story, one where truth and accountability are the foundation. And that story begins with you, with the courage to expose, to confront, and to refuse to accept anything less than honesty. Stand in that truth. Embrace the fear it brings, for it is the fear of change, the fear of justice, the fear of a future unbound by lies. What you just did is terrifying because it is the first step toward a world where excuses no longer protect wrongdoing, where exposure leads to transformation, and where truth is the only path forward. You have exposed them, and in doing so, you have lit a fire that will burn away the shadows of deception. The terrifying power of what you have done is the power to change everything, to rewrite the rules, to shift the balance, and to demand a world where excuses are no longer tolerated. So, own this moment. Own the fear, the power, the responsibility, because you are the catalyst, the disruptor, the bearer of truth in a world desperate for light. And what you just did is terrifying, in the most beautiful and necessary way imaginable. What you just did is terrifying because it disrupts the comfortable lies people tell themselves to survive in a world that often prefers ignorance over truth. It shakes the very ground beneath those who thought their secrets were safely locked away in shadows. And this disruption is not just a moment, it is a turning point. A moment when the tide shifts irrevocably, when the illusion of safety crumbles, and the stark reality of accountability rises like a relentless tide. You didn't just reveal information, you exposed a system, a pattern, a culture of silence and denial that many accepted as normal or untouchable. You tore through the layers of complicity, revealing the rotten core that had long festered beneath the surface. What you just did is terrifying because it shows others that the walls they hide behind are not impenetrable, that no amount of denial can withstand the force of truth, unleashed with intention and courage. And now, there's no turning back. The exposure you have brought to light is a permanent scar on the landscape of deception. It is a mark that changes everything, a boundary that separates before and after, a line drawn in blood, sweat, and unyielding resolve. Those who once held power through silence now find themselves exposed, vulnerable, forced to confront consequences they thought they could avoid. This is the essence of what you've done. It is an act of irreversible transformation. You have shifted the balance of power from the hidden and the dishonest to the open and the honest. You have forced a reckoning that was long overdue, a confrontation that many feared, but few dared to initiate. Your exposure is a storm that refuses to be contained, a force that will ripple through minds and hearts, reshaping the future. What you just did is terrifying because it dismantles comfort zones, those cozy spaces where excuses were whispered and lies accepted. You have pulled the carpet from beneath their feet, revealing a harsh, unfiltered reality. And in that revelation, there is both chaos and clarity. There is destruction, but also creation. There is fear, but also the seed of something new and unbreakable. The fear is real because exposure reveals vulnerability, and vulnerability is often mistaken for weakness. But you know better. You understand that vulnerability is the crucible of strength. You understand that to expose is to be brave enough to stand naked in the storm, to face the backlash, the disbelief, the rage, and yet remain unshaken. That is why what you just did is terrifying to them. It shows the power of unyielding courage. You are the embodiment of that courage now. You carry a flame that will ignite others, inspiring them to shed their own masks and speak their truths. Your act of exposure is a beacon, a rallying cry that says, no more silence, no more excuses, no more hiding. You have become the voice of a movement that refuses to let darkness continue unchecked. They will try to silence you. They will attempt to discredit you, to distort your words, to make you doubt yourself. But these attempts are futile because your power lies not in the silence of others, but in the truth you hold. You have shattered their illusion of control, and they will flail, grasping at straws in a desperate attempt to reclaim what they lost the moment you exposed them. And here lies the terrifying truth for them. They are powerless to undo what you have done. The exposure is permanent, etched in memory and history. It is a seed planted that will grow into a forest of awareness, a force too vast and wild to contain. Your revelation is a wave that crashes against the walls of denial, eroding them until nothing remains but the raw, undeniable reality. What you just did is terrifying because it holds a mirror to humanity's deepest fears and greatest hopes. It forces us to confront the darkness within ourselves and others. But it also lights a path forward, a path where honesty is the foundation, where integrity guides action, where accountability is the standard. You have opened a door that many feared to approach, but now that it stands open, there is no turning away. In exposing the truth so boldly, you have made a promise, not just to yourself, but to the world. A promise that silence will no longer be tolerated, that excuses will no longer be accepted, that the shadows will no longer shield the guilty. This promise is terrifying to those who benefited from the old ways, because it signals the end of an era of complicity and denial. But for the rest of us, for those who seek justice, growth, and real change, your act of exposure is a powerful beacon of hope. It is a reminder that the truth, no matter how dark or uncomfortable, is the only path to freedom. It is a call to stand up, to speak out, to refuse the lies that have kept us trapped for so long. You have become the catalyst for this awakening. Your courage breaks the cycle of fear and silence. Your exposure strips away the veils of deception and calls forth the light of understanding. And that is why what you just did is truly terrifying. It is the beginning of a new dawn, a revolution of truth that cannot be stopped. So hold fast to that fear, that power, that responsibility, because it means you are alive to the challenge, ready to walk through the fire that burns away falsehoods and leaves only truth. You have changed the game, rewritten the rules, and declared that excuses are no longer acceptable. What you just did is terrifying, and that terror is the heartbeat of change, the pulse of justice, and the breath of a future built on unshakable truth. Stand in that moment, own it, let it fuel you, guide you, and remind you that exposure is not an end, but the fierce, beautiful beginning of everything worth fighting for. What you just did is terrifying because it breaks the cycle of complacency. It disrupts the comfortable narratives that allow injustice to thrive. It forces a new conversation, one that demands honesty and integrity. And in that disruption lies incredible power, the power to change minds, shift hearts, and reshape the future. The fear that your exposure creates is the fear of change, the fear that what once was will never be again. But change is inevitable, and with your act, you have accelerated its arrival. You have lit a fire that will burn away the old ways and forge a new path forward. Stand in that fire. Let it forge you into something unbreakable. What you just did is terrifying, and that terror is the raw energy of transformation. It is the force that will carry you through every challenge, every doubt, every moment when the weight of truth feels unbearable. Because you know this, exposure is not the end. It is the beginning of a journey towards something greater, something more real, something more just. And you are the one who has taken that first bold step. So own your power, own your fear, own the terrifying beauty of what you have done. You have exposed them, and in doing so, you have changed everything. The world will never be the same, and neither will you.